horrible man. I begged the courts to let me go home where I could be protected by them.
These are some of the most disturbing and gut-wrenching POV clips ever caught on camera. I've personally searched through countless videos to try and bring you only the most intense and unfiltered moments. Some of these are so extreme that they've been wiped from the internet, so as always, viewer discretion is highly advised. Level 1. Man discovers lost GoPro. In July 2019, YouTuber Rich Aloha was scuba diving in Foster Falls State Park, Tennessee, when he made a shocking discovery. He had been hunting for treasure but found nothing more than a GoPro camera buried in the mud at the bottom of a lake near a waterfall. It turned out that the GoPro belonged to Richard Ragland, a 22-year-old man who had tragically drowned at the same location 2 years earlier in 2017. He was spending the day with friends swimming near the waterfall when he went underwater and never came back up, just days before his 23rd birthday. But what made this discovery so incredible was that the SD card inside the camera was still intact and functional despite being submerged for a full 2 years. When he checked it, Rich discovered that the footage on the card captured Ragland's final moments, showing him smiling, swimming, and enjoying his day with friends. At the time, Rich had no idea who the man on the tape was, but he soon remembered that he had been told all about Ragland's death by park rangers. This was likely the young man's lost camera. Determined to do the right thing, Aloha spent hours researching online to find a way to contact Ragland's family. Eventually, Aloha succeeded in reaching out to Ragland's parents, Robin and Gary McCreer, who were overwhelmed by the news. They had previously been sent a thumb drive by park rangers containing some of the final footage of their son, but it had apparently been stolen in transit, meaning they never got any closure on his death. Aloha eventually met with the McCreers to return the GoPro and its contents, making for an emotional moment. The family was grateful for the opportunity to see their son living life to the fullest in his final hours. Robin McCreer expressed her appreciation for Aloha's efforts, saying that his persistence in contacting them means the world to us. Aloha, who considered his diving adventures a form of ministry, felt that he was divinely led to this discovery. He described the experience as indescribable and stated that he doesn't think there's ever been a more impactful find. Exploration of the Bohemian Grove. YouTuber Dancer1 conducted a daring investigation into the secretive Bohemian Grove, a private 2,700-acre campground in Monte Rio, California, owned by the elite Bohemian Club. Well, at least that's what we know to be true. For years, the Bohemian Grove has been the focus of conspiracy theories due to its highly exclusive nature and elite membership. Very few people are allowed to join, and those that do are rarely ever heard from again. That tight-knit secrecy has led to a host of claims of satanic rituals and allegations of youth abuse, which have surrounded the club for as long as it's existed. But Dancer1 wanted to know for sure. He waited until the off-season when it was colder and fewer members would be visiting the campground. Using a kayak, he carefully crossed the Russian River and entered the property undetected. After navigating the dense trees and the uneven, steep terrain, he eventually reached the heart of the campground, only to find it was far, far more unsettling than even he expected. Right before him, he saw the infamous 40-foot owl statue, which serves as the centerpiece for the club's annual cremation of care ritual, a slightly unsettling annual tradition that nobody gets to see. But the further into the grounds he got, the more and more surveillance Dancer1 saw. Video cameras and security guards everywhere, and that was just what he could see. There could be motion-activated sensors anywhere, and the consequences of breaking into the world's most secure cult could be deadly. So he left. But Dancer1's investigation didn't stop with this initial foray. He claimed to have returned to Bohemian Grove multiple times, including during the annual July encampment when the cremation of care ritual takes place. He says that he even witnessed part of the ritual, describing the sight of a person covered in cloth being carried and placed in a boat, suggesting a mock sacrifice of some kind. But the truth is that nobody has any idea what takes place in Bohemian Grove behind closed doors, and Dancer One's investigation suggests we don't want to. Level 2. Westinghouse Electricity Factory. In the heart of Cleveland, Ohio, stood the once mighty Westinghouse Electric Factory, a testament to America's industrial prowess. This colossal facility, which had churned out everything from metal casings to lighting equipment, was once among the largest factories in the United States. But in 1979, the production lines fell silent and the factory doors closed for good, leaving behind a giant shell of its former glory. Chris Hill, also known as Urbex Hill, set his sights on uncovering the secrets that lay within the abandoned walls of the factory. He wanted to discover the remnants from the factory's heyday, frozen in time for over 4 decades. But before he even got into the building, Chris got an ominous sign. The sound of gunfire, a shootout not far from their location.
Yeah, somebody's shooting. Damn. That's Cleveland. Wow. That's crazy. It's not even that far away from here. Oh shit, that sounds like a shootout.
But it wasn't enough to stop him. He wanted to see inside the factory. The factory itself was nothing special, just an abandoned building left to decay. But when they went into the basement, everything got much more real. The place looked like a war zone, dripping with water and broken down. That's when the noises began.
Okay, I'm hearing something. Maybe it's an animal. I'm sure there's animals down here.
Strange noises echoed through the basement, which Urbex Hill assumed, or hoped, was some kind of an animal, like a stray dog. Of course, if they did encounter a stray dog in this basement, escaping would be a serious challenge. But as if all of this wasn't intense enough, Urbex's lights started to switch off right as those unsettling noises began again. It was horrible timing, but the bizarre and unknown noise just made them want to venture deeper and find out what it was. They found a strange man crouched in the corner, shirtless and staring at the wall, not moving. He was clearly homeless, possibly high on some kind of drug, but suddenly the noises made sense. It turns out that the basement was home to a homeless encampment, a large-scale resting place for people who have nowhere else to turn. But that was enough to make Urbex say it was time to leave, if they could still find the exit. Dog's GoPro captures strange sounds in Michigan forest. A man and his dog were hiking through the Huron National Forest in Michigan. The man had fixed a GoPro to the dog, hoping to get some cool and unique footage from his pup's POV. The man had a history of hunting for Bigfoot, always hoping that he would one day get the legendary creature on camera. So far, he had been unsuccessful. But the man never once gave up hope. This could be the day. But he couldn't have anticipated he would get something far stranger. As the dog fished around the forest looking for something fun and interesting to play with, a bizarre sound rang out across the woodland. A strange shriek, inhuman and frankly unsettling.
I don't know what the hell that is over there. Alright, get away from there.
It sounded nothing like any other known animal sound in the world, something more demonic and screechy. The dog heard it right away, and the man soon heard it afterwards, but he had no clue what the animal could possibly have been. The noise just got louder and louder, and more intense to boot. As the dog started going toward it, the man decided that they had to leave. It was too dangerous to go and chase the sound of an animal they had never heard before. When the video was eventually uploaded, the man's followers identified the sound as an Aztec death whistle, a bizarre and sinister old whistle once used by the Aztecs for sacrificial purposes. It emits a sinister, haunting, and frankly terrifying screeching sound, exactly like the one the man and his dog heard. But whether this was all one big prank or something more sinister and intense, we're still not clear on that. Daniel O'Neill's camping encounter. In 2023, Daniel O'Neill, the creator behind the YouTube channel English Woodsman, was making what he thought would be a pretty typical camping video. He had ventured into an area he was not super familiar with, that he had never really visited before, hoping for a totally different kind of video. Daniel had specifically chosen his location to be far from the nearby cows, right in the middle of the woodland for some peace and quiet. But as he set up all of his recording equipment, he started to feel unsettled by something he had heard.
Hello? Hello? You got to better hear that. There's nobody here. I'm going to put it down, there could just be something behind me here. But it sounded like human footsteps.
While he was walking, he heard a strange noise, what seemed to be human footsteps beside him. But it was all on his own, and if there had been someone walking near him, he would have been aware of it. The overthinking was bothering him. He couldn't spend an entire video obsessing about it, but the noises didn't stop. Not for a second. After his tent was set up and he was inside, he suddenly heard another mysterious sound outside. What seemed to be someone walking past his tent. He dismissed it again, convinced that he was now just hearing what he wanted to hear, but when he played back the recording, he confirmed that the sound was real. Yet, nobody was in the area. By this point, his anxiety was rapidly increasing, noticing more and more bizarre noises outside of his tent. But every time he checked, he saw nobody nearby. And the sounds picked up on the recordings seemed impossible. Dry footsteps, despite the wet, muddy conditions. No matter how much he convinced himself that he was just hearing things or making it up, Daniel kept hearing the noises. He knew he had to find another spot to camp outside of the woods. He later described the noises that he had heard as being animal-like, but impossible to describe in any more specific way. All he knew was that he had to get out of there as quickly as possible. He would never come to know what the noise was. Level 3. Fake cop traffic stop. It was just after midnight on a September night in 2019, and an Albuquerque Police Department officer was driving home when he noticed what seemed to be a traffic officer conducting a stop near 4th Street and I-40. The traffic cop had pulled over an SUV and was in the process of interrogating the driver, but something about it rang strange to the APD officer. For one thing, the traffic stop officer wasn't driving a regulation vehicle, he was driving a civilian car with red and blue flashing lights. For another, he was wearing plain clothes with nothing even remotely police-like other than a strange star-shaped badge on his belt. And the biggest and strangest issue of all, he just happened to look very young. The APD officer decided to approach the traffic cop and get some answers, believing that he would have identification that could clear the whole thing up. The traffic officer introduced himself as Brendan Wazinski, a cop that had worked for the Bernalillo County Sheriff's Office for 3 years. He had stopped the SUV for allegedly traveling at 120 miles per hour on the highway, but something was still really off. And the more that he questioned Officer Wazinski, the more that feeling continued to grow. Officer Wazinski couldn't produce proper identification. His birth year, 1994, didn't match the registration of his vehicle, suggesting that wasn't his car. And he wasn't wearing appropriate police attire or equipment. Only at this point did Wazinski admit that he was not, and had never been, a cop.
Alright. I'm just gonna be straight up honest with you, I'm not a cop.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just gonna be.
Where'd you get that badge from?
I bought it offline.
Okay. Do me a favor, stay in here, okay? For a second.
He had purchased the badge online and fabricated his story about being a deputy, expecting to get away with it and secure a bribe from the people he was pulling over. Wazinski was arrested and charged as an adult with impersonating an officer. During questioning, he changed his story multiple times, at one point claiming the badge belonged to his deceased father, a claim the sheriff's office couldn't verify. In the end, all that they knew was that Wazinski had lied about being an officer, but everything else remained a total mystery. Fishing next to an active dam. In 2022, a YouTuber called Skylar, or The Sky Life, decided to make a fishing video. But he wanted to go fishing in a unique and different spot, settling on a bank next to the very active Phoenix Dam. The signs all over the area had warned of danger, urging people not to fish in the water. The official guidance was that there would be 3 loud sirens signifying that the dam was about to release and flood, but Skylar didn't care. He thought the odds of that happening were so low that it was almost irrelevant. At first, Skylar's experience was incredible. After a series of failed fishing attempts, he was getting a whole bunch of impressive catches. Smallmouth and largemouth bass were coming in left and right, and he believed he was about to catch a real big one. A giant, unidentified fish that nobody had seen before. But the fishing trip was suddenly interrupted by a loud, blaring noise. A siren.
I gotta go. Oh. I got 2 more sirens. Uh-oh. I'm almost back.
Skylar knew instantly that wasn't good, but then it was followed by a second siren. Knowing that the water was about to be released in a very, very dangerously quick gush, Skylar had to rush over the slippery rocks to safety, the exact situation the signs had warned him about. He had to stay calm even though they were mere moments away from being completely obliterated. When he finally got to safety, he realized that there was no third siren coming. The entire thing had been a false alarm, possibly triggered to deter him from fishing in the area. The water wasn't rising, nor was it ever going to rise. In his rush to escape the scene, Skylar had injured his leg, another risk that these signs had warned him about. He had a good time fishing while he did, at least. Despite initially dismissing the warnings that had been laid out all over the area, Skylar finally had to admit that he should have listened. He told his viewers to respect the warnings, to be safe, and to not go fishing next to an active dam. Orca encounter. In Norway, a group of tourists climbed on board a big wooden boat heading out into the fjords in hopes of seeing some orcas in the wild. Of course, there was no guarantee that they would be able to see any, but just as the sun was starting to go down, they had some luck. An orca passed by their boat, and then another, and another. Within a matter of minutes, they found themselves in the middle of a massive pod of whales, with dozens and dozens of the orcas surrounding them and passing peacefully. It was an incredible view, but of course, everyone was terrified. The killer whale is one of the biggest animals on the planet, an apex predator that has more than earned its reputation in the world. And while they don't usually tend to attack humans, there have been multiple cases of that happening. In 1972, a surfer in California was bitten on the leg by an orca but survived. In 2005, a 12-year-old boy in Alaska was bumped by an orca while swimming but not injured. And in 2014, a diver in New Zealand was pulled underwater by an orca grabbing his catch bag but escaped unharmed. All other cases of humans being attacked or killed by orcas have happened in captivity. But that doesn't mean that seeing this many this close is not terrifying. Fortunately for these people, the orcas had no interest in harming them. Hidden basement discovered. A man had recently moved into a studio apartment in England, having agreed to rent it without even seeing it once. The cost of living in the UK had skyrocketed, and all he really wanted was a small, nice space for an affordable amount. But when moving day arrived and he came to see his new home for the first time, he started to realize exactly why the rental price was so low in the first place. The whole vibe of the place was strange. It was a beautiful old building with high ceilings, a 19th century monastery-type design with mirrors everywhere. But the bedroom was so small that he couldn't even stand up. But none of that was anything compared to the strange handle in the floor. He believed that the apartment was built to contain some additional underfloor storage, but when he opened it, he found that it went much deeper than he had anticipated. Alone in his home at 10 p.m. with nothing more than a camera and a torch, he ventured down into what he described as the dungeon of the house. The dungeon was covered in graffiti with a bricked-up window, a bizarre trench with a grate that he suspected was a burial ground, and what appeared to be a brick seat or a sacrificial altar. It had all the hallmarks of some kind of ceremonial